Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'll continue to bring you the latest developments in the intense story between CEO James and LyTuDiep. As you already know from the previous episodes, although Officer Lee has received some credible leads on Diep's whereabouts, up to now, neither the police nor James have been able to find her. The search efforts are still being carried out urgently, but time is not on their side. On Diep's side, things are becoming more dire than ever. After being bitten by a snake deep in the forest, her health has deteriorated significantly. Prolonged fevers, combined with the lack of timely medical care, have made her condition worse by the hour. She's nearly completely exhausted. But somehow, with a flicker of willpower left, Diep struggles through the cold rain, trying to find a way out, hoping to save herself. The scene is heartbreaking, a small, fragile girl all alone in the wild, battling both physical pain and nameless fear. Meanwhile, James is like a man who has lost his compass. Though strong and rational in business, when faced with the possibility of losing the woman he loves most, he is falling apart. He throws himself into the search like a madman, ignoring the weather, ignoring all warnings. In his heart, there is only one goal. He must find Diep, whether alive or on the brink of collapse. He needs to see her with his own eyes. So, will CEO James find Diep before it's too late? Will their powerful love help them overcome everything? Stay tuned until the end of today's episode to find out more emotional twists in this story. After a long, relentless day without rest, Officer Lee and James were nearly exhausted from combing through every inch of land around the suspected last known location of LyTuDiep. They left no stone unturned, from narrow alleyways where even daylight struggled to reach, to dense forests with knee-high grass. They even weaved through the most crowded markets, where hundreds of people passed by daily, hoping someone might have caught a glimpse of a strange, fragile, solitary girl. But everything fell into silence. No one remembered. No one knew. No clue emerged. Diep's trace had seemingly vanished into the noise of the world, leaving behind unanswered questions. Standing amid the crowd, James felt as if he had fallen into a cold void, where fear slowly crept in, silently forming in the corners of his mind. What if Diep had truly collapsed somewhere? What if he was too late? What if everything had slipped beyond his reach? These thoughts pierced him like needles, sending his mind into chaos, his eyes constantly blurred, by the rain or perhaps by tears that refused to fall aloud. Officer Lee, though always dedicated and understanding, eventually had to leave. His duty didn't end with one missing person, there were many other cases waiting. Before he left, he gave James a firm handshake, one that needed no words but carried the weight of sorrow and helplessness. He left behind a few marked maps and emergency contact numbers, then walked away as the rain grew heavier. James stood still, watching Lee's figure fade into the gray curtain of rain, leaving him alone to face a journey with no clear destination. With no police support left, James made a decision. He would continue the search on his own. He knew a car couldn't access the narrow alleys, dead ends, and forest paths. So he chose a motorbike, the only vehicle that could take him where others couldn't go. It wasn't just a practical choice, it was a vow. No matter how hard it got, he would not stop until he found Diep. The weather had turned worse in recent days. The rainy season had officially arrived. Torrential rains poured from morning to night, from night to dawn. The roads were slippery, many parts so muddy they were indistinguishable from deep puddles. Still, James carried on, raincoat on, helmet secure, checking every poster with Diep's photo. That familiar face, now resembling a missing person's image, stirred sorrow in the hearts of those who saw it. He plastered the posters on walls, utility poles, the back of his bike, even his chest and back, so anyone passing by might recognize and remember. He rode through village roads, into hidden forest communities, old motels, provincial markets, rural clinics, even abandoned churches, anywhere with a trace of humanity, he stopped. And every time, James asked the same, aching question. "Have you seen this girl?" But the shaking heads, the sympathetic glances, only deepened his despair. Yet, he refused to fall. Within James still burned a flame, small but unwavering, called hope. He believed that as long as he kept walking, kept searching, there was still a chance. And even if that chance was no more than a faint glimmer at the end of a dark tunnel, he would follow it to the very end. In the downpour, each drop of rain stung his skin with icy sharpness, but nothing stung more than the ache in his heart. Hands clutching the handlebars, eyes fixed on every turn, every shadow. On the muddy, shadowed path, the man kept moving forward, quietly, steadily, driven not by the need for reciprocation, but by a love so deep it only asked for one thing: that she still lived, and could come home. Days of relentless rain during his desperate search for Diep had finally pushed James's body past its limits. The rain didn't just soak his clothes or seep into his skin with numbing cold, it became a dark symphony of despair, echoing with every beat against his resolve, slowly wearing down a man clinging to a fragile hope. Each hour passed in silence and futility, draining his spirit, and his body, already weakened from days without rest, began to give in. That afternoon, the rain still hadn't stopped. Tiny drops like needles lashed at his face as he returned home. James staggered inside, drenched head to toe, his face pale from the cold, and his steps faltering, as if the lightest gust could knock him over. His mother, a strong, elderly woman, was already waiting by the door. From the very first day Diep went missing, she had quietly watched her son's every move. She never stopped him, never complained, just stood silently like a steadfast tree sheltering him from the storm. The moment she saw him, her eyes dimmed. In that instant, she didn't just see a grown man, but the little boy who once burned with fever in her arms, now struggling to stand tall for a woman he loved. James opened his mouth to speak, but dizziness struck, forcing him to brace against the wall. His mother rushed to support him, her hands trembling slightly as they touched his forehead, burning hot. He had a high fever. "You need to rest, James," she said gently, her voice laced with worry but calm. "If you keep going like this, it won't be Diep who disappears first, it'll be you." James said nothing. He gave her a weak nod, trying to ease her concern. But before he could even change clothes, he collapsed onto the bed. His body burned, sweat drenched the pillow, and his breathing turned shallow and heavy. His mother sat beside him, wiping his face with a warm cloth, eyes never leaving him for a second. In over 20 years of raising James, she had never seen his eyes look so hopeless. The love he held for Diep, though never spoken aloud, was clearer than any confession. James slipped into a fevered sleep. In his restless dreams, he kept seeing Diep. Sometimes she stood in the forest, soaking wet, eyes wide in panic calling his name. Other times, she lay collapsed on the roadside, arm reaching out to him, silently pleading for help. The dreams were vague, blurred, voiceless, but haunting enough to twist every breath he took. Then the phone rang, breaking the suffocating stillness of the small home. His mother answered immediately. A man's voice came through, gruff but certain. "I'm calling because I saw the girl from the flyer. I think I saw her." He recounted how, 2 days prior, while driving his truck through a remote forest road, about 70 kilometers southwest of James's home, he saw a young woman walking alone by the roadside. It was pouring rain. She had no umbrella, just a thin, drenched coat, walking slowly, her eyes distant and empty. What struck him most was how utterly tired and alone she looked, a girl in the forest, in the rain, with no luggage and nowhere to go. When he returned to town and saw the missing person flyer, he realized it was her, the same face. "I'm not sure," he said cautiously, "but if it's her, she needs help. Urgently." He then gave a detailed description of the location where he saw her. James's mother returned to the room. James was stirring, still feverish and weak, but his eyes had regained focus. She relayed every word from the call, trying to stay calm but unable to hide her excitement. Before she could finish, James was already sitting up, like a jolt of electricity had surged through him. He trembled as he pulled himself upright, searching for the map and marking the place the caller described. "I can't miss this," James said, his voice raspy from fever. "I have to go now." "You're very sick," his mother said, holding his hand. But James shook his head, eyes glistening. "What if she's still there, and I'm too late?" His mother went silent. No words could stop a heart that loves. Minutes later, James had thrown on his coat, his rain gear, and attached the last of his flyers to his bike. He kick-started the engine. The rain outside began falling harder again, as if testing his resolve. The road ahead was long, dangerous, and his body still burned with fever, but James wouldn't allow himself a single second of delay. Once there, he wasted no time. He plastered posters on every rest stop, store, roadside stall. He asked every local, every passerby. Each shake of the head pierced him like a needle, but still, he pressed on. The forest wind cut like blades, rainwater ran down his face, and his hands trembled from cold and fever, but James did not stop. As for Diep, her condition was worsening by the day. Since the snake bite, although the wound had passed its most dangerous phase thanks to the first aid knowledge she once learned, the venom had already done its damage. With no medicine, no one by her side, the wound on the surface might heal, but inside, her immune system was slowly collapsing. Her body had begun to waste away. Her cheekbones jutted sharply beneath her pale skin, her eyes sunken, lips cracked from dehydration. Since the day of the bite, Diep hadn't had a real meal, only scraps of stale bread, wild fruits from the forest, or handfuls of weeds plucked from the roadside. Occasionally, she gathered the last of her strength to knock on doors in nearby villages, asking for work, but each time, she was turned away. Diep understood what she must look like. Soaked clothes, mud-streaked skin, tangled hair, a feverish, hollow face. She didn't blame anyone. If she were them, she too might not trust a nameless girl wandering in the rain as if fleeing from something. Those silent rejections, no insults, no harsh words, cut even deeper. They told her one thing: she was slowly becoming invisible to the world. The monsoon rains had dragged on for a week, as if the skies, too, had no compassion left for the small girl's fate. Every morning she awoke to gray clouds, biting cold, and suffocating humidity. The constant downpour meant she couldn't stay in one place too long, forced to keep moving either to avoid detection, or simply to find something edible. She once rejoiced over half a loaf of bread left behind. She drank rainwater caught in leaves. There were no other options. But the human body has limits. And Diep was nearing hers. The cold and rain had brought on a serious chill. Her early coughs were faint, sporadic, but they soon grew frequent and harsh, stabbing her chest with each spasm. Her throat burned, breath came in ragged gasps. Every coughing fit forced her to cling to a tree or rock to stay upright. Her chest felt compressed, her vision blurred from fever. Still, she forced herself onward, because she knew, if she lay down to rest, she might never wake again. Her body shivered violently. Her fingers had turned purple, lips tinged blue. A violent cough drove her to her knees on the wet ground. She tried to draw a deep breath, but even the air felt cold and heavy, like the weight in her heart. She collapsed against a tree trunk, hugging her knees, trembling in the forest rain that poured like a waterfall. At this point, Diep no longer knew how many days she had wandered. She didn't even know where she was anymore. All she knew was this: if she woke up, it meant she had survived another day, and that was the only thing keeping her from giving up. Somewhere inside, a flicker of hope remained. Faint, but still alive, she believed James was looking for her. She didn't know if he even knew what had happened, if he knew she was missing, or where to begin searching, but just the thought of his determined gaze, the warmth of his voice once saying, "I will always find you," that alone gave her strength to rise and keep walking. That night, after days of relentless rain, the sky finally began to clear. The forest air was still cold and damp, but at least the downpour stopped, leaving behind a rare, fragile silence. Using the last of her strength, Diep gathered bits of dry wood beneath a tree canopy. She shakily scraped off the damp bark with a small knife, layered dry leaves and rotting bark underneath, and managed to build a small fire in a patch of clearing, her temporary shelter for the night. She laid fresh banana leaves on the wet ground to block the cold seeping up from below. With a few sticks and a crumpled piece of plastic she'd found days ago, she constructed a crude shelter. That tiny fire, though weak, was her only source of life now. She sat close to it, pulling a torn burlap sack she'd found over her shoulders, shivering uncontrollably from the chill that had sunk deep into her bones. From her pocket, she pulled out some wild ginger and a few small forest tubers she'd foraged earlier. Hard, bitter things few would ever eat, but in times like these, she had no choice. She placed them on a flat rock near the fire, watching the flickering flames reflect in her bloodshot eyes, worn out from exhaustion and sleepless nights. The sharp scent of roasting ginger filled the air, but it couldn't mask the burning pain in her throat. A coughing fit overtook her again, curling her body into a ball, almost knocking her flat. The night grew colder. Her fever surged. Her body burned with heat, yet she still felt freezing. Each breath was labored, as though her chest were pinned down by stone. She curled tighter, drawing closer to the fire, though its warmth was fading with each dwindling ember. She wrapped the sack tighter around herself, head on her knees, arms hugging her frame like a lost child in the wild. And then, she drifted into fevered sleep. No one knows how long she had her eyes closed. But in her dream, a gentle, yearning dream, she saw James. He came to her silently, said nothing, just reached out and wrapped her in his arms. His embrace was warm, solid, and it almost made her cry. He kissed her forehead and whispered something she couldn't quite hear, but she felt safe. She clung to him tightly, afraid he might vanish if she let go. All her bottled-up longing poured out in that moment. In James's arms, the storm faded, the pain disappeared. She wanted the dream to last forever. Wanted to stay wherever he was, even if it was only in her mind. They embraced under the trees, firelight dancing on tear-blurred faces. But it was just a dream. Reality was the damp, dark forest night. The wind returned, making the flames flicker weakly. The burlap sack soaked through with dew offered little warmth to her fevered body. She coughed again in her sleep, her flushed face drenched in cold sweat, soaking the banana leaves beneath her. The night fell, dense and frigid, covering the fragile girl like a shroud. Diep lay there, deep in the forest, burning with fever. And the fire was dying out. But is the information from the stranger truly accurate? Can James, with all the love and strength he has left, push through the fever, the storm, and the perilous forest path in time to reach Diep, who lies weak and barely clinging to life? As Diep shivers alone beside a dying fire, her frail body curled up in the heart of a vast, silent wilderness. Will that final glimmer of light be seen by James? Will love be strong enough to bring them back together? Will this be a tearful reunion? Or a heartbreaking farewell with no time for last words? All will be revealed in the next episode. Stay tuned and continue walking this emotional journey with us. And don't forget to follow, like, and share if you too are hoping for a happy ending for James and Diep. See you in the next chapter.
Hello, xin chào tất cả mọi người. Ngày hôm nay thì mình có một chút vấn đề về sức khỏe, nhưng mà mình vẫn cố gắng làm video để cho mọi người xem. Hy vọng rằng mọi người sẽ thích video mới lên hôm nay và có thể ủng hộ cho kênh của mình nhiều hơn. Và mong rằng video cũng có thể truyền tải những thông điệp ý nghĩa về tình yêu, cũng như để khuyến khích mọi người tin vào tình yêu hơn trong cuộc sống. Hôm nay thì mọi người cũng có thể biết là James và Diệp hiện tại quãng đường để họ gặp được nhau thì nó đang còn rất là ngắn, rất là gần nhau rồi, nhưng mà bởi sự ngăn cách của số phận thì hiện tại hai người vẫn chưa được đoàn tụ. Và hiện tại sức khỏe của Diệp thì khá là yếu rồi, tại vì mọi người có thể thấy là cô trải qua rất là nhiều khó khăn trong cuộc trong cái quãng đường mà trở về tìm James, từ rắn cắn cho đến là bây giờ là trời mưa rất là nhiều và Diệp không thể xin được một công việc nào để có thể có một nơi trú ngụ. Việc đó khiến cho người Diệp đang bị cảm lạnh. Vậy thì diễn biến câu chuyện sẽ diễn ra như thế nào thì mời mọi người hãy theo dõi ở trong những tập tiếp theo mọi người nhé.